Among the countless certainties catalogued across 7,000 years of interstellar civilization, one stood unshakable. Certain mistakes cost you everything, and the bill came due immediately. Not suggestions, not guidelines, but hard, unforgiving rules written in the language of... According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Physics, and punctuated with the wreckage of those who thought they could negotiate. The Galactic Transit Authority had spent 7,000 years cataloging these rules, measuring them, posting warning signs around them, and occasionally scraping what was left of idiots who ignored them off various celestial bodies. One such rule, perhaps the most straightforward of them all, stated that if your vessel experienced catastrophic engine failure while entering the gravity well of Theta 9's outer moon at 0.7 light speed, you died. Not might die, or probably die, or should consider updating your will. You died. Period. End of biological functions. The mathematics didn't care about your species, your insurance policy, or your plans for next Tuesday. The moon itself was a thoroughly unpleasant chunk of rock that served no purpose except to occasionally remind passing ships that moons existed and should be avoided when your navigation systems were having what the technical manuals euphemistically called a bad day. Its surface was comprised of 70% jagged mineral deposits that could shred hull plating like tissue paper, 20% impact craters from previous objects that had learned this lesson the hard way, and 10% dust that got absolutely everywhere and made salvage crews miserable. The transit lanes gave Theta 9's moon a berth of roughly 4 million kilometers, which any reasonable pilot understood meant, this area will kill you. Stay away. The safety zone was colored bright red on every navigation chart, accompanied by a skull icon that transcended language barriers. 14 different species had contributed to the design of that skull over the centuries, each adding their own cultural interpretation of, seriously, don't go here, until it became a masterpiece of universal warning symbolism. When the distress beacon activated at 0400 Galactic Standard Time, the response team from Station Outpost Viridian knew exactly what they were responding to. Not a rescue, a recovery. Specifically, a recovery of whatever small pieces might be worth cataloging for the insurance adjusters and the inevitable safety board inquiry that would conclude, once again, that flying into death zones resulted in death. The response team leader, a Quelix named Vorth who had been doing this job for 32 years, prepared his crew with his usual speech about emotional detachment and proper containment procedures for biological matter. Quelix were six-limbed insectoid beings with exceptional attention to detail and absolutely no patience for foolishness, which made them ideal for this sort of work. Vorth had seen 247 crash sites. He had never, not once, found survivors in a red zone impact. The crew consisted of 5 members, each selected for their ability to handle grim work without falling apart. There was Kess, a Tralvian whose species had 3 hearts and apparently needed all of them to maintain their perpetually anxious disposition. Next came Ro and Rome, a bonded pair of crystalline echoes who communicated through harmonic frequencies and whose translucent bodies made them excellent at spotting small debris. Finally, there was Jex, a young Miruvian on his 3rd recovery mission. Still green enough to feel sad about the work, but experienced enough not to vomit anymore. Their vessel, designated Recovery 7 Actual, made the journey to the crash site in 40 minutes. Vorth spent that time reviewing the telemetry data, which painted an absolutely spectacular picture of everything going wrong simultaneously. The crashed ship, a small personal transport registered to some freight company in the outer colonies, had experienced what the computers called a cascading systems failure, which was technical jargon for every single thing that could explode did. The pilot had apparently attempted 17 different emergency procedures, none of which had any realistic chance of success once the ship entered the moon's gravity well at that speed. The descent path looked like someone had thrown a brick at a wall and tracked its trajectory. Impact velocity was calculated at just under 300 meters per second, which was fast enough to turn any known biological organism into what was technically classified as paste. "Standard recovery protocol," Vorth announced as they approached the coordinates. "Jex, you're on documentation. Crystallines, sweep for debris scatter. Kess, you're with me on the main site. We catalog, we bag, we file the report. Nobody touches anything until it's been scanned." The crash site was, in a word, spectacular. The transport had hit hard enough to create a crater roughly 40 meters across and 15 meters deep. Pieces of hull plating had scattered across a 100-meter radius, embedded in the rock like some kind of abstract art installation about the fragility of life. Scorch marks radiated outward in a pattern that suggested multiple secondary explosions. The main body of the ship, or what remained of it, sat at the bottom of the crater, compressed to roughly 1/3 its original size. "Anybody want to bet on whether we find anything bigger than a finger?" Kess asked, their translator picking up the nervous humor that Tralvians use to cope with stress. "I'll bet we don't find anything bigger than a cell," Rome harmonized. Vorth didn't participate in the betting. He'd seen too many crashes to find anything amusing about them anymore. He directed the team to begin their sweep, expecting this to be recovery number 248, another data point in the galaxy's ongoing lesson about respecting physics. That's when the door opened. Not a hatch popping loose due to pressure differential. Not debris shifting. The actual door, on the side of the compressed wreckage that should have been fused shut by the impact, opened with the distinctive hiss of hydraulics that somehow still functioned. The entire recovery team froze. 6 different species' survival instincts all fired simultaneously, because doors didn't open at crash sites. Doors were opened by living things, and there were no living things in impacts like this. That was the rule. A figure emerged from the wreckage, moving slowly, carefully, stepping over twisted metal with the kind of deliberate caution someone uses when they're acutely aware of how sharp everything is. The suit it wore was a standard EVA model, scorched and torn in a dozen places, held together by what appeared to be emergency sealant foam and sheer stubborn refusal to disintegrate. The helmet was cracked across the visor, spiderwebbed with fractures that should have meant immediate decompression and death. But it was what the figure carried that made Vorth's 4 primary breathing spiracles stop functioning momentarily. 2 small bundles, wrapped in what looked like emergency thermal blankets, cradled against the figure's chest. Through the semi-transparent material, small faces were visible. Feline features, elongated ears, the unmistakable facial structure of Kethran cubs, probably no more than 3 or 4 cycles old. The figure looked up at the recovery ship hovering above the crater. Even through the damaged helmet, even across the distance, Vorth could see the being inside. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry. The distinctive flat-faced profile that had been appearing with increasing frequency in incident reports across the galaxy. Human. The human stood there, in the center of a crash site that should have been a tomb, holding 2 alien children, and raised one hand in what Vorth's cultural database helpfully identified as a wave, a human greeting gesture. "So," Kess's voice crackled over the comm, translated words carrying a pitch that suggested the Tralvian might be having a cardiac event. "Are we still doing a recovery? Or has this officially become a rescue?" Vorth's mandibles clicked together, the Quelix equivalent of someone trying to reboot their brain after witnessing something that violated everything they knew about reality. He started, then stopped. Started again. "I need to revise my report." Below, the human appeared to be checking on the bundles, adjusting the thermal blankets with movements that suggested careful concern despite whatever injuries they surely had. The cubs were moving, Vorth realized. Active, alive. The galaxy had rules. Physics had rules. Biology had rules. Vorth had spent 3 decades learning these rules, respecting these rules, building his entire career around these rules, and standing in that crater, absolutely covered in evidence of why those rules existed, was a human who apparently hadn't received the memo. The recovery ship descended into the crater with all the grace of a bureaucrat realizing their paperwork was about to become significantly more complicated. Vorth's primary concern, beyond the small existential crisis currently short-circuiting his logical processes, was figuring out which forms he was supposed to file when the deceased refused to cooperate with being deceased. The human watched their approach with what appeared to be patience, though Vorth was beginning to suspect that reading human body language might require an entirely new field of xenopsychology. The being shifted its weight from one leg to the other, a movement that suggested discomfort but not imminent collapse, which was baffling considering the wreckage it had just emerged from looked like it had been pre-chewed by a supernova. "Kess," Vorth said carefully, "run a bioscan on that human. Tell me what we're dealing with." "Already running it," Kess replied, their 3 hearts apparently having reached some kind of agreement to keep functioning. "And boss, you're not going to like this." "I already don't like this. Give me the data." "The human is registering multiple fractures, severe tissue damage, what looks like internal bleeding in at least 3 locations, possible concussion, definite radiation exposure, and enough stress hormone markers to tranquilize a Borvian battle beast. According to every medical database we have, this being should be unconscious at minimum, dead at maximum. And yet, it's standing there holding babies like it's waiting for a transport pickup." Vorth made a decision that he suspected would haunt his performance reviews. "Land us, carefully, and get medical ready for, apparently everyone." The ship touched down 30 meters from the human, close enough to render aid but far enough that if this turned out to be some kind of elaborate hallucination brought on by bad station food, they had room to reassess their life choices. The loading ramp extended with its usual hydraulic wheeze, and Vorth descended first, followed by Kess carrying the medical kit that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. Up close, the damage to the human's suit was even more horrifying. The material had melted in places, torn in others, and appeared to be held together primarily by optimism and physics violations. The helmet's crack ran from the left temple across to the right cheek, a fracture that should have meant instant depressurization. Somehow, the emergency foam had sealed it, creating a transparent patch that looked about as reliable as a politician's promise. The human's face was visible through the damaged visor. Female, Vorth's database supplied helpfully, though he wasn't entirely sure why that mattered when dealing with someone who had apparently negotiated a new treaty with death. Her features were set in an expression that hovered somewhere between exhausted, determined, and mildly annoyed at the inconvenience of surviving. "You speak Common Galactic?" Vorth asked, his translator converting his clicking mandibles into something the human's suit receiver could process. "Yeah," the human replied, her voice crackling through damaged comm equipment. "Sorry about the mess. Things got a bit rough on the way down." "A bit rough." Vorth stared at the crater, at the scattered debris, at the wreckage that looked like it had argued with a moon and lost spectacularly. "A bit rough." "You survived a .7 light-speed impact," he said, not quite managing to keep the accusatory tone out of his voice. "That's not supposed to be possible." "Tell me about it," the human said, and had the audacity to sound conversational about it. "I had a whole different plan for today." Kess moved forward, scanner extended, doing their best impression of a medical professional who hadn't just watched all their training become theoretical fiction. "We need to get you to medical immediately. And the cubs. Are they injured?" The human looked down at the bundles she carried, her expression softening in a way that Vorth's database tagged as protective and maternal, which seemed odd considering these weren't even her species. "They're okay. Scared, probably traumatized for life, but physically okay." I made sure of that. You made sure, Vorth repeated. During a crash that compressed your ship to 1/3 its original size, you made sure. Well, yeah. They're kids. What was I supposed to do? Let them get hurt? The question hung in the air like a rhetorical grenade. What was she supposed to do? The list of things she was supposed to do during a catastrophic crash included panic, attempt futile safety procedures, make peace with the inevitable, and die. Nowhere in any emergency protocol did it mention protect members of another species while simultaneously violating every known law of biology. How? Kess asked, their scanner beeping in increasingly distressed tones. How are you alive? How are they alive? How is any of this happening? The human shifted her grip on the cubs, wincing slightly. Had to get creative. When the engines went, I knew we were going down hard. Grabbed the kids from their seats, found the most reinforced section of the cargo hold, wrapped them in every shock-absorbent material I could find, then basically turned myself into a cushion. You turned yourself into a cushion, Vorth said flatly. Crash position, you know. Curled around them, took the impact on my back and shoulders. Figured if I was going to die anyway, might as well make it count for something. Kess's scanner emitted a particularly alarming beep. Your spine has compression fractures in 7 locations. 7. You should be paralyzed. Should I? The human considered this. Huh? Well, I'm not, so that's good news. That's not how medical science works. Look, I don't know what to tell you. Adrenaline's a hell of a drug, I guess. And I was really motivated not to let these kids die. Vorth felt something in his worldview crack, not unlike the human's helmet. Walk me through it. From the moment you knew you were going to crash. The human took a breath, which Kess's scanner indicated should have been agonizing given the rib damage. Engine failure hit us about 90 seconds out from the moon. Tried the emergency protocols. None of them worked. Realized we were going to impact and there was nothing I could do to stop it. So you accepted death, Vorth said, trying to find something in this narrative that made sense. I accepted that I couldn't fly the ship. Didn't accept death. There's a difference. She adjusted one of the bundles as the cub inside made a small mewling sound. Grabbed the kids, found the cargo hold, piled everything soft around us. Emergency foam, thermal blankets, even some grain sacks that were being shipped. Built a nest, basically. A nest. Best I could do on short notice. Then I positioned myself so I'd take the initial impact, wedged us into the corner where 2 bulkheads met, and held on. Rome, who had been silently scanning the wreckage, chimed in with a harmonic tone of disbelief. The structural damage indicates the impact force was approximately 400,000 newtons. Distributed across a human body, that should result in immediate catastrophic failure of every major organ system. Yeah, it wasn't pleasant, the human agreed. Definitely don't recommend it. 0 stars. Would not crash again. She was making jokes. Standing in a crater that should be her grave. Holding cubs she'd somehow kept alive through physics that didn't exist, with injuries that should have killed her 3 times over. And she was making jokes. The cubs' parents? Vorth asked, suddenly realizing there should have been adult Catherine on that ship. The human's expression shuddered, the humor vanishing. Didn't make it. They were in the cockpit when the forward section. They didn't have time to even know what happened. It was fast. And you were in the back with their children. I was helping them with the kids when things went wrong. The mother, she looked at me when we knew we were going down. Didn't say anything. Didn't have to. I knew what I had to do. Kess had stopped even pretending their scanner readings made sense. Your body is running on stimulants it's producing itself, suppressing pain responses that should be overwhelming, and maintaining motor functions that should be impossible with your injuries. By every medical standard, you should be in shock and unconscious. Can't go into shock, the human said simply. These 2 need someone conscious, so I'm staying conscious. That's not a choice you get to make. Apparently it is, because I'm making it. Vorth looked at Kess, then at the human, then at the wreckage that surrounded them. Somewhere in his mind, the neat and orderly universe he'd spent 3 decades understanding was being rewritten in real time, and he wasn't. Sure, he appreciated the edits. "Get them on the ship," he finally said. "All 3 of them. Medical can figure out how she's still alive after they make sure she stays that way." "And the report?" Kess asked. Vorth looked at the crater, at the impossible survivor, at the cubs that should have been casualties. "I'll think of something," he said, which was the biggest lie he'd told in his entire career. The medical bay aboard Recovery 7 Actual had seen its share of unfortunate remains over the years, but it had never quite prepared itself for a patient who argued with the equipment. The human lay on the examination table, still refusing to release the cubs until Kess had personally shown her the pediatric unit where they'd be monitored, still conscious despite sedatives that should have dropped a Borvian, still somehow functioning. "Your skeletal structure has microfractures in 40% of measured bones," the medical AI announced in its perpetually calm voice, designed specifically not to alarm patients. "Recommended treatment includes full skeletal reconstruction, 6 months of regeneration therapy, and complete bed rest." "Counteroffer," the human said. "Patch me up enough that I can walk, give me something for the pain, and let me check on those kids every hour." "That is medically inadvisable. Add it to the list of inadvisable things I've done today." Vorth watched from the observation window, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that his species used to process information that didn't fit into existing categories. Next to him, Kess was reviewing the scans for the 8th time, as if repetition might make them make sense. "Her adrenal system is producing hormones at 400% normal human levels," Kess muttered. "Her pain receptors are partially shut down, not from damage, but from deliberate neurological override. It's like her brain decided which systems were essential and which ones could wait." "Can humans do that?" "According to our database, only in extreme circumstances. It's called hysterical strength. Usually lasts minutes, not hours." "How long has she been in this state?" Kess checked the timeline. "From engine failure to now? Approximately 2 hours and 17 minutes. 2 hours of running on borrowed biology, of holding off pain and injury through nothing but stubborn refusal to quit." Vorth had seen soldiers, trained warriors from a dozen species who couldn't maintain combat readiness for that long under optimal conditions. This human had done it while being crushed by a moon. The medical AI continued its assessment with the determination of a machine that hadn't yet realized it was dealing with a malfunction in reality itself. "Internal bleeding has largely stopped due to accelerated clotting factors. This is unusual. Blood pressure remains stable despite blood loss that should result in hypovolemic shock. This is highly unusual. Patient maintains coherent responses despite head trauma consistent with severe concussion. This is—" "Let me guess," the human interrupted. "Highly unusual?" "You seem remarkably calm about violating medical science," Vorth said through the intercom. The human turned her head toward the observation window, wincing at the movement. "You know what's weird? The whole way down, I wasn't scared for me. I was terrified for them. Kept thinking, they're just babies. They didn't sign up for this. I have to do something." And then we hit, and everything went white for a second. And when I could think again, my first thought was, are they breathing? And your second thought? Okay, good, they're breathing. Now don't pass out, because if you pass out, they're alone and scared, and that's not acceptable. Kess's 3 hearts did their asynchronous palpitation thing. You chose not to pass out. I really, really wanted to pass out. But wanting things doesn't make them happen. So, I stayed awake. The medical AI, perhaps sensing it was losing the argument with biology itself, switched to a different approach. The cubs are unharmed, minor stress indicators, but no physical injuries. Based on impact reconstruction, they should have sustained fatal trauma. They were wrapped in 6 layers of shock absorption, the human explained, and I angled my body so most of the kinetic energy went through me instead of them. Basic physics. Well, basic if you're willing to be the crumple zone. Vorth's worldview cracked a little further. You used yourself as a crumple zone. That's what I just said. Crumple zones are for vehicles, disposable materials designed to absorb impact. Yeah, well, I was the only disposable material available. Better me than them. The casual way she said it, as if turning herself into a shock absorber for alien children, was just another item on a to-do list, made something click in Vorth's understanding. This wasn't bravery in the traditional sense, the kind that required pumping yourself up and charging into danger. This was something quieter and somehow more terrifying. The simple refusal to accept an outcome she found unacceptable. The galaxy operated on rules. Physics, biology, chemistry, all the fundamental forces that kept reality functioning in predictable ways. But watching this human, broken and bleeding, and still somehow winning arguments with medical equipment, Vorth realized that humans operated on a different rule entirely. They operated on spite. Not anger, not aggression, but pure, concentrated spite directed at the universe itself. A fundamental disagreement with how things were supposed to work, backed by enough stubbornness to make reality blink first. "The Cubs are asking for you," Kess said quietly, reading something on their tablet. "Pediatric unit says they're calm when they can hear your voice through the intercom, agitated when they can't." The human tried to sit up, failed, then immediately tried again with the determination of someone who hadn't learned from the first attempt. "Then get me to them. You can't walk. Watch me." And somehow, impossibly, catastrophically, inadvisably, she did. Vorth filed his report at 0600 after 3 hours of staring at a blank screen and questioning his career choices. The final document included phrases like "unexpected survival outcome" and "circumstances requiring further study," which was diplomatic code for "everything I know is wrong and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." The Galactic Transit Authority responded within the hour, which was unusual. Their response was a single line: "Please confirm human involvement." He confirmed. Their second response took longer and included 17 attachments of previous incidents involving humans and impossible survivals. Apparently, this wasn't even the strangest one this month. The Cubs recovered fully within 2 days, which was expected. The human recovered within 5, which violated so many medical predictions that Kess had stopped updating the file out of professional exhaustion. She walked out of medical with a limp 47 stitches, and the Cub's small hands clutched in hers, their adoption paperwork already filed. 3 weeks later, the Red Zone safety protocols were updated. A new subsection appeared, titled simply, "Human Variable." It included no useful information, just a warning that standard probability models didn't apply. Vorth read it and clicked his mandibles in resignation. The galaxy had rules. Humans had other ideas. Somehow, the second kept overruling the first, and everyone else just had to document it and move on.